Hey people, congratulations to La France. As you may know, we've just entered the magical world of Wano Arc in the manga. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking, in terms of like, okay, what's next after Wano for the story? More specifically, I think it's a good time to just begin thinking about like how many arcs are left in the series after Wano. I'm just going to throw this out there and say that according to me, like if I were writing One Piece, I would probably have 4 arcs post Wano, and they would be as follows. It would be an Elbaf arc, a Vegapunk arc, a Raftel arc, and a final war arc. Although technically speaking, if Oda really wanted to cut down on the length, I'm pretty sure he could make it work with just 3 arcs and then just have a bunch of world building chapters in between each of the arcs. Now for me, the 3 arcs that absolutely have to happen because of the enormous amount of foreshadowing that we've gotten are the Elbaf arc, the Raftel arc, and the final war arc. So starting after Wano, Oda can go back into the world building atmosphere of it all and address some of the major plot points that were introduced in Reverie that were not concluded or that were kind of left open. Then again, if Oda really wanted to, he could start giving us answers to some of the things that were raised in Reverie gradually as we venture into the magical land of Wano. And that being said, like the pacing thus far for Wano has been absolutely tremendous. Like that plot point with Zoro stealing Ryuma's sword and being incriminated for it, that was resolved in less than a chapter, whereas if this were like Dressrosa pacing or Whole Cake Island pacing, that would have taken at least 4 chapters to resolve. Hawkins is already on the move. Last chapter ended with a connection to Ace being brought up. So Oda is really, like seriously, not wasting any time. There's a lot of momentum building up very fast. And I think it's because Oda's just really excited to get to the meat of it all because he's waited this long to get to this point. You know, to draw an arc based on the country that he belongs to, where he was born, his homeland, Japan. So then the question is, okay, so then what happens after? And I think narratively speaking, Wano has to serve at least 2 purposes. Number 1 is to raise the stakes, not just for the Wano arc, but for the entire series so that we can move on to those finale chapters with a lot more investment and just a lot more writing on Luffy being victorious by the end of the series. You know, people have been talking death flags for a while now. I think Law is like a number 1 candidate for that to happen, unfortunately, which is a little bit contradictory because I also think that another thing that Wano has to accomplish is that it needs to prop up the reputation of some of the other Supernova. I was actually reading one of Sandman's translations on Twitter recently, shout out to Sandman, and he posted up a list of stuff that hadn't been planned, hadn't been like thought of like beforehand by Oda. And one of the things on that list is that I think Oda never intended for Law to be such an important character. And this is something that a lot of people don't know, but the 11 Supernova were pretty much like improvised. Like, you know, Oda had like a day to come up with all of them. So, but here's the thing, right? So I think Law became a really, really big fan favorite. And so he decided to stick with him and sort of develop him a little bit more as the story progressed. Like even possibly he even decided to make him a D. So we got the whole tie-in to Doflamingo and all that stuff. But here's the thing, like at the same time, Oda always knew that Kid would be an important character. And you can kind of tell that that was going to be the case because not only was his bounty higher than Luffy's when we first got introduced to him back in Sabaody, but at the same time, much like Blackbeard and Luffy, Kid has a very strong will. Like as far as we know thus far, Kid was the only one out of the 3 captains who refused to bow down to Kaido despite knowing the consequences of that behavior. Yet even before that, even before Kaido fell from the sky, this guy was aiming for Shanks. So it's like he just doesn't care. He doesn't take orders from anybody. Kind of reckless. So he knows the consequences, but he kind of goes along with what he wants to do anyway, which again is very similar to what Luffy does and what I've seen Blackbeard do as well. And yet, even despite that recklessness, Kid was actually one of the people that was kind of surprised when he noticed that Luffy was about to hit a celestial dragon. He's like, yo, is this guy serious? Like, is he going there? I mean, if Kid, knowing how reckless he is, like he was blowing stuff up in bars just because Apu looked at him funny. And he's sitting there looking at Luffy like, wow, wait, hold on, this guy's for real? And so this is where some fans begin to make the connection that perhaps Oda is trying to set up Kid to become this Shiki character in the future, where in which he goes up against Roger, he kind of like has clashes with him, but ultimately he respects him and would like Roger to join him. because he just respects him so much. So that could be, foreshadowing to the future of Luffy and Kid's relationship. In fact, when Shiki learns that Roger has been executed, he gets very upset. So upset, in fact, that he starts slaughtering Marines left and right because he can't believe that Roger died the way that people say he did. What I really like about the aftermath of that scene where Luffy punches the Celestial Dragon in the face is that after that happens, we cut to Zoro, and Zoro has his sword out, and he's like, I was actually thinking about cutting him earlier, but you beat me to it. You punched him before I could cut him. So he was already thinking about doing this, and we saw this, Bonnie saved him. He stopped him from doing that. So I kind of thought it was funny how he was already thinking about doing the same thing that Luffy ended up doing. And so with that in mind, where I'm going with this is that ultimately, after Wano, I can definitely see both Kid and Zoro having a bounty that either reaches or surpasses the $1 billion berry dollar mark. I mean, I feel like that's pretty much a given at this point, especially considering the fact that Luffy is already worth more than 1 billion. Then we go to Imu-sama, or Im, or I'm, and ever since this mysterious character got introduced in the Reverie, the conversation has shifted from Blackbeard being the final villain to this guy, or this person being the final villain. Now, this was actually heavily foreshadowed. The world government being the final villain, the last obstacle of the series, was already foreshadowed by Whitebeard during the Marineford War. So I'm just going to go back to his speech, his final words, and they go like this, okay? It's a good speech. He says, "Teacher, I'm sure someone will appear to carry on Ace's will someday. Even if you extinguish his bloodline, there is no way that flame will ever burn out. It has been passed down from ancient times, and in the future, someday someone will appear carrying the history of all those decades on his back to challenge this entire world to a fight. Sengoku, you and the world government are afraid of that immense battle that will engulf the whole world someday. I didn't care about it myself, but as soon as someone finds that treasure, the entire world will be turned upside down, and someone will find it. That day will definitely come sooner or later. The One Piece is real!" Notice that he says after the treasure of One Piece gets found. Not before, after. That's when the world government is going to be like, what just happened? How could this happen? That's when all hell is going to break loose, and the world government is going to have to intervene with Im at the head, all right, to contain this chaos and stop it from erupting further, all right, to their dismay. Now, here's the thing. We already know this, but in order to get to Im, you have to go through the 5 Gorosei, because they are the official named protectors of the throne. So who do you think is going to take on the Gorosei? I mean, I can definitely see Zoro taking on the guy with the katana, maybe Sanji taking on the blonde one, Kid possibly taking on another one. Because going back to Kid, I mean, he's very aware of the fact that the people at the top are scumbags. He even has this quote in Sabaody where he says, "When scum rules the world, only more scum is born." And ever since Im got introduced, I've actually gone back to see some of Blackbeard's moments and scenes and dialogue, just to double check the things that he says. And it's I think it's becoming more obvious now that Oda definitely intended Blackbeard to be Luffy's opponent, be an obstacle for Luffy to overcome, but not necessarily his final villain. Because the way things stand right now, if nothing changes, the outcome of Luffy versus Blackbeard to me is going to determine, okay, what's going to happen with the One Piece. The result of that fight is going to be, okay, this is who gets to have the One Piece. It's the fight for the One Piece. Whereas the fight of Luffy versus Im is going to be, okay, what's going to happen to the fate of the world? Now, make no mistake here, okay? Blackbeard is a horrible human being. He's not a good person. In fact, I was just reading Sandman's translation for one of the chapters of the Ace novel, and there was a scene where he's talking to Thatch. So apparently nobody in Whitebeard's crew knew about the fact that it was Blackbeard, that it was Teach who gave Shanks his scar. Nobody knew that. That's not something that Teach ever disclosed to the crew, which makes sense because he was just pretending to be a crewmate. He was just pretending to be a friend, just to up his chances of getting the Yami Yami no Mi. That being said, there's another scene in the Ace novel where Thatch, Ace, and Blackbeard are talking, and since Thatch is the cook of the ship, he tells Ace, Ace, I'm actually kind of jealous that you have that devil fruit power of the Mera Mera no Mi, because as a cook, I could really use that fire ability, that that ability to control fire while I'm cooking. And then Teach says, hey Thatch, if you want it so badly, you can just kill Ace and take that power for yourself. So it's like, whoa, where did that come from? That's a really bad joke. That's not even funny. That was a red flag right there. So even from back then, you could tell that his morality was kind of already rotten and dark and toxic and just kind of sinister. So he's not a good person. He's an evil schemer / murderer. And yet, even with that, I don't get the same vibe out of Blackbeard that I get from Im, because this is how messed up Im is, okay? People don't even know that Im is a thing. People don't even know that Im exists. He has to keep people in the dark because that's how he operates from the shadows, okay? So people are not even aware of his existence and he uses that ignorance to his advantage to make these moves, all right? And by the way, at this point in the story, if we put 2 and 2 together, and considering how the Gorosei were asking to tell them, okay, who is the next light that needs to be extinguished, if we put 2 and 2 together, it becomes fairly obvious that Im is responsible for genocide. So Im has had an agenda all this time that is primarily based on keeping the truth from people, okay? Whereas, yes, Blackbeard, again, he's a criminal, he's done a lot of nasty stuff, and yet even then, Blackbeard appears to have some notion, some understanding of how important it is for people to have dreams and have things to aspire to. And I don't know if this necessarily has anything to do with him being a D, but he also has this hands-off sort of approach where, at one point where Luffy and his crew were going to Skypiea, Burgess was telling him, hey, Captain, we have to follow them, do something, Captain. And then Teach is like, no, don't worry about it. Eventually we'll meet up. Someday we'll cross paths again, as long as they stay on the Grand Line. It's kind of like our fate, because everybody who goes on this journey to become strong will eventually cross paths. So just don't worry about it, Burgess. Also, back in Jaya, when Luffy and Zoro decide to take a beating to sort of practice some restraint against Bellamy in the bar, Nami walks out of that bar very upset, because it's literally how could you guys let this happen? Those guys just walked all over you. And then Blackbeard tells her, you do know that, your guys literally won that fight, right? Because when you have dreams, when you aim high, sometimes you do come across fights that are just not worth fighting for. Because the guys at the bar were making fun of Luffy wanting to go to Sky Island. They were telling him you're stupid. Sky Island doesn't exist. You're crazy. You're wasting your time. And then Teach not only tells Luffy, Zoro, and Nami, I hope you get to Skypiea. I really hope you do. But he also tells them, when you aim high, sometimes you have to be able to learn how to get laughed at by the non-believers that don't aim as high as we do. And so he kind of sees a part of him reflected in Luffy in the sense that they both share pretty big dreams. And that could be the common denominator in the future for them to come to a compromise and possibly clash against the world government. Assuming, of course, that Blackbeard is still alive by the time that Luffy confronts Im. Then again, Blackbeard could also use that confrontation against the world government to his advantage and gain something out of it. And then finally, I'm going to close with this. So Oda drew an older version of both Luffy and Ace, Luffy and Ace in their adult and older years. And I know when this first came out, a lot of people were really excited and really liked the designs and stuff. But to be honest, my first impression when I saw that was why is this being drawn? And not only why is this being drawn, but why is this out for the public to see? It was kind of strange because, look, just based off of the Reverie, we know that Oda is very meticulous about not letting stuff get out before he wants to, okay? He's very, very careful about spoilers and stuff like that. Stuff that he doesn't want to reveal just yet. So when I saw that, I was like, is that a warning sign? Is he drawing Luffy now as an adult because he doesn't care if that design gets out because he's never actually going to draw him that way in the actual series? And if that's the case, then how is the series going to end? Is Luffy going to die before he reaches that age? Are we not going to get to see him like that? Or maybe this is just a temporary design, and then he, if he decides to switch the appearance, he'll do that in the manga. Is this just for fun? Because we already know, it's already been stated that Oda already has that final panel of the manga in his head. Okay, that hasn't changed. It's been the same panel for a while now, and every single chapter that he draws and writes is a step towards that panel, that final panel of One Piece. So I guess my question is that Luffy design going to be a part of that final chapter, of that final panel? Because if it is, that seems like a pretty big reveal to have it be dished out in an SBS section. Unless, of course, Oda has the story end even before Luffy reaches that age and looks like that. But that being said, thank you so much for watching. Let me know how many arcs do you think are left after Wano for the story to reach its final stage, its conclusion. What are you hoping to see? Do you feel like Teach is the final antagonist of the series? Do you feel like Akainu is? Or do you feel like it's going to be everybody, teaming up against Aim? How do you think the story is going to unfold after the magical land of Wano Arc is over? Thank you so much for everything you do. Like the video if you did. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Catch you later. Bye.